All right, guys. Special video here. By the way, I'm Tassinix, professional streamer, by the way. Recording a video here with some heavyweights in GAC, fellow members of Shadowlands Vanguard, and they're going to share with us today their secrets for their plottings and schemings when preparing for a new week of GAC. So without further ado, let's introduce our guests. First, we have on screen right now is TJ5270. Hey, TJ, how's it going?
Hey Taz, how you doing? Thanks for the invite.
Doing super well. So, tell the good people, where are you at right now in GAC?
So I'm currently ranked around the 60s, so the top 100, and bouncing back and forth.
Awesome. That's kind of what I've been doing here the last couple of weeks myself. So yeah, one top 100 player under our belt. Everybody knows Dagger. Dagger, you want to pipe in?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on this. I'm climbing back up to the top like 200 from the 700 after a bad week.
Yeah. Yep. It's hard up here, guys. I mean, it's easy to drop more than, 100 rank from one loss if you're like in the top 100, something like that. I mean, it's huge to lose these matches.
Similar to yourself, finally having Star Killer is going to help me get back up there, because that was being down that piece was super, super rough.
No doubt. Absolutely. Yeah. And then last, and certainly not least, the one, the only, Sashaisha. Sir, how are you? Good to have you among us today.
Hey, Tess, thank you for having me. Long-time watcher, first-time participant, man. So I'm psyched to be here. Thank you for all you do and all the great content you create. So to your original question, I think I entered the week ranked second, and thanks to Pimpo and a loss yesterday, I'm now ranked fifth. I finished the last two seasons. I think the first season ranked 10th, and the second season took a loss in my last battle, so I think I was 15th. So I've been bouncing around there, a lot of bumps and bruises with some extremely talented Krakens.
I'm sure of it. Yeah, guys, so Sashaisha is one of the good handful of people that I'll reach out to for consults about this squad, that squad. He's usually up in the neighborhood of like the top 10 every GAC season. So we've got, some real brass here for how to actually lay the groundwork for a successful week in GAC. We wanted to give the special honor this week to Sasha to start off for us, and he'll lay the groundwork for what he does, and we'll have our other guests and myself tack on to that later with what we might do or a little differently from the main path. But Sasha's going to lay it down for us. Where would you like to begin, sir? By the way, I've got a browser that I can pull on screen if you want me to like demonstrate stuff. Actually, you wouldn't be able to see what I'm demonstrating, right? So, we could figure something out. Maybe you can.
We could go through, and if there's something particularly relevant, I think for the viewers, feel free to bring it up.
Sure, we'll
show it. Even if we don't see it, TJ Dagger and I have used whatever resources you show, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for the honor of letting me start. But I think what's appropriate, kind of for me to start with, is a lot of my preparation and how I have evolved as a player over time has been through things like this, collaborating with other great players, TJ, Dagger, yourself, many others within the Shadowlands community, and certainly beyond. So one of the things that I end up doing is just creating a lot of relationships, and there's a lot of just sort of organic back and forth of, oh, hey, what did you see in these matches? So I'll start there by saying that a lot of the preparation just comes from being connected with the community and observing what's happening in the game. I will also say my preparation has really evolved and changed over time. Like, I honestly didn't do a ton of preparation in the older GAC format. A lot of things were not matched as competitively, and you could probably hang on with the same type of defense or same relative strategy for a pretty extended period without people, with a few rare exceptions, really doing the research and getting prepared for that. For a competitive GAC environment like we've got now, I do something that's unfortunately a little more time intensive. It's a hell of a lot more fun, so I'm enjoying it. But my process now, in some ways, it's similar. So I would say kind of fundamentally, I I go through sort of creating a two-tiered strategy. The first is figuring out how I'm going to use Galactic Legends, and the second is how I'll use all of my non-GL squads. And I do that in part because I think one of the greatest risks that you face in these matches is if you've made a real mistake in your Galactic Legend allocation, you don't have the proper counters, you can run into a hard stop and find yourself screwed and lose the match.
Down and out of the game.
Exactly. So none of that is, I think, surprising. What I have found particularly helpful, and so the first resource that I'll mention is swgoh.gg. Going there as a resource and understanding, I guess, first and foremost, whoever it is you're matched up against, what's their history look like? And I've always used that as sort of formulating my strategy. If you can, when you take a look at an opponent's history, get a sense both of what they set on defense. I think everybody does that, and that makes a ton of sense of if there's a very regular pattern. And again, as you get to more and more competitive matches, people are playing a little bit of hide and seek or a little bit of chess with it, moving pieces around, but you can still recognize patterns. And I'll want to anticipate that and prepare for it. But that's in looking at their defense. Mm-hmm. The next thing I would say, and then pretty quick, I'll hand it over to these guys. We say they're fantastic at their prep too, and I'm sure take a lot of different innovative angles. But where I spend a decent amount of time actually is on the history, but on the offense side of an opponent. And the reason I spend a lot of time there is when I formulate my defense, the way this works, it's like an extremely elaborate Rochambeau rock, paper, scissors game, right? There are certain things that match up well against others and certain things that don't. If you can recognize a pattern with an opponent on certain, and it doesn't have to be the Galactic Legend level. It can be a non-GL squad. Patterns where they use certain offenses against certain defenses regularly. If you can, with the way the map works now, have them expend that on the bottom front wall before they get to the back, it can be really useful. And none of that's I think a shocking strategy. Right. But if I can do that, you can lay smaller traps on the non-GL level to hopefully have them expend their non-GL counters to your non-GL defense. And essentially, unless they have a surplus Galactic Legend, which ideally on that level of strategy, you've prevented them from having, you could be in pretty good shape. So I spend a lot of time on that front. I do also lay out, so I'll do one more thing, and I want to hand it over to the other guys, and we can just kind of keep going back and forth here. But I think like a lot of people, I lay out a spreadsheet for each match. It's a very simple thing on Google Docs, and it's just, here's what I plan on setting on defense, sort of as in what that. Well,
now we can actually go into considerable detail about scouting. And we can work our way in towards the scouting discussion, because that's certainly part of like the opponent level play. But are you? Let's bring our focus from the outside in on the whole week, right? What before you even know who you're matched against for the week? What are you doing to get ready for it? How are you? Making use of what you've learned from the last week of play. New modding, like you already said, how you will talk to other players, that are competing at the top end, like getting ideas like, hey, did you see, because I know you and I have that conversation pretty regularly is, hey, did you see anything that caught your eye this week? Did you come up against anything crazy? So just before you even get matched into your bracket, what are you doing for laying your groundwork for success?
Sure. I guess one of the things that I'll consider, I guess there are two sort of actions that need to be taken or can be taken in preparation for the week. One is how you're going to mod. So how you'll shift modding across your roster. And primarily it's about an investment of speed, but sometimes it's about a unique build. Like the investment of speed is like, hey, I'm going to go all in on a super fast, I don't know, let's just say super fast Qui-Gon Jinn team to try and take initiative there and catch people by surprise. Or I want, an extraordinarily fast Queel to be able to prevent some stuff. Those types of things I will look at. I will try and change from week to week. But as I look for those little sort of ploys or stratagems, like a lot of that is coming out of like what I've observed or and it's observed either somebody else more often than not. I mean, against the point of like being as well connected and just sort of working with and absorbing like the collective intelligence of the community. There's so much cool stuff going on of like, hey, that was really an interesting ploy and I'll adopt it. The next level beyond that occasionally is like, oh, I'm just seeing such a trend with how people are countering a particular approach that if you can make some sort of tweak or change, to try and address that, and it hasn't been done, that's a nice little surprise.
Do you have an example to encapsulate something like that?
Well, I'll call out one example, and I think it was TJ. So indirectly, I think this idea. I got it from another guild member who I believe credited TJ for this, and TJ, you'll have to I guess clear it up as to whether it was you, but like an example of a really, really fast Qui-Gon Jinn team. Right? Like I mentioned that before. I hope I'm not blowing anybody's cover on this stuff, but you have subtle little things like the ability to have just a huge initial salvo from a team like that, because yes, you're getting 30 speed from a Qui-Gon Jinn lead. Everybody kind of considers that. People forget perhaps that Cam's unique has another 30 speed. People will maybe not consider that Ahsoka, her unique, gives her a ton of speed. So if you just do a simple like cursory look through that squad, you may just say, oh, well, gosh, look at all these tunes have maybe like 310 speed stated, or that, it's not going to be spectacular. But when you add those uniques on, suddenly they get first mover advantage and you get this just blowout initial salvo. Mm-hmm. That's an example of one that, I got through the community. It's also an example of a ploy that probably only works once or twice, maybe three or four times.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to get TJ to weigh in on this, and then also I'd love to get TJ what your kind of early game preparation is here before you get matched into the bracket. But yeah, about that Qui-Gon Jinn counter, man, that is fire. It worked for me really great for a couple of weeks, and now I need the pieces too much. I need the parts more than I need the whole thing. So it's had its time in the sun and all, and they're still modded for that business. So I always have the option at my discretion, but yeah, man, it's been tough lately. Anyway, what do you got to say, TJ?
So I can't take credit for it. I am not the original owner of that decision. Now, I saw some things, and Taz, you and I talked about it, and I think conversation is a key piece. But just to clear the air on that one, that was actually something I saw. Because always being a student of the game, I'm always trying to watch people's streams. I'm always trying to watch different fights or help everybody, because I can learn from either what you do or don't do, and then how you play the game, because everybody plays it differently. We have aggressive players. We have efficient players. We have players who put everything on the defense and then just want to get a couple points here and there to win. So there's all these different strategies. And it's basically just being a student of the game, I think is the biggest one. Watching the strategies, watching it happen. So for like the Qui-Gon Jinn, I watched one of our guildmates get taken out by one, and it was not looking at not the third character. It was looking at the fourth and the fifth. And because I didn't take into account everybody's kit, that whole cycle, you lose something and you miss something. And it's that little piece that can take you on a tangent that you're not going to expect.
Yep. And then you get blown out. No forgiveness.
And that's it. And that's it. And Taz, I know you and I talked, and I'm like, let's change the strategy of what I've seen happen and add this piece.
Yes.
And then now I change the puzzle, right? Because everything's telling a story. So when you change one piece, turn one period into an exclamation point, do something else, you change the entire story. So what you're going to take against that is not going to be the same thing that the next person is, or that they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, very fair points, one and all. And now let's hear more about your weekly preparation. What are you doing? So, we can pick off where Sasha left off.
Yep. So for me, before I even go in one, I like to try to get an idea of where I'm going to be faced up against. So the way the new setup works, once you're on the leaderboard and where you're at, it's pretty consistent that you're going to face maybe these 8 people. So being able to check out who's going to be around you, or even if there are possibilities, kind of looking at their account. So again, just being a student of the game.
Now, does this idea work on week 1? Does this work before you're? Does it only work after you're locked in? How soon can you actually trust the intel?
So you're going to get a general idea of where you're placed once you're in the game. It's basically right after you're done and you see where the points spread are allocated. You can start looking at the people and get an idea of who they are based on what they have in the system, right? Mm-hmm. Again, it's you're taking a risk. So you're going all in to look at what's going on, look at the players, look at their accounts, see what they're doing, so you can kind of get an idea of how to prep.
So you're doing that method where you're scouting the 7 people above you and the 7 people below you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now, when you're scouting, I don't know about you guys. I'll let me see if I can't get a copy of it on my screen here. I can share it with you guys later. I know Dagger's seen it, but here's something I use, guys, all the time is this planner tool. Oh, come on, go over there. Go. So I just put this primitive tool together just the other day, but basically what I'll describe it to you guys who aren't seeing it here on camera, but it's just simply a chart of opponents' characters and their speeds. So I just put in key characters. This is all just to have this information at a glance, right? So I'm putting in GLs, your Gideon, Cat, Bad Batch Echo, Dash, Darth Revan, Queel, Zam, Piet, Boss Grief, Han, Kyle Katarn. And I could add on to others from there, but for the purpose of this opponent, who I have scouted on screen here, this is enough for me to make my plan. And then what I do is, I use other stuff. Actually, you know what? We're moving off topic, guys. We'll come back to this when we're talking in detail about the scouting. But in terms of tying into TJ's point here, the idea that you would look at the 7 people above you and below you, this is what I would be looking at when I do it, is looking at their key characters, right? Identifying who you're going to have to build your counters around. And anyway, feel free to pick it back up from here, TJ. Sorry.
No, and that's okay. I think everybody's got their way to do things. I think the other thing, and when I'll go with our guildmate, Lego. So Lego, who's in the top 100 as well. The other thing that we've done consistently now is after every season, it's come back together to collaborate, and they're utilizing templates from hot utils, adjusting mods. If there's anything I've seen on a consistent nature that's changed, so like, hey, I've seen this. So that collaboration, but it's moving the mods around. I think mods are basically going to be like 75% of what's being able to work. Because if I move from a super fast build on a character to a super strong build or a super healthy build or something else, again, it changes the fight. So being able to do this and come back together and say, let's take this character, let's move the speed up. This is what I've seen based on me helping others. Because again, everybody knows what they call the TJ signal, but if I'm tagged or to come help, I'm gonna step in to come give a hand, right? And
absolutely.
There's some story behind that, but for the players out there, it's really the more you can study and see what's happening and see what's doing in the community and something that may have worked against you, and take every win, take every loss, and come back and look, what could I have changed, and then take that to the next season. Because once you're locked, you're locked. But if you have that ability to make those moves beforehand, that also sets you up for kind of like a big advantage, in my opinion.
Absolutely. All right. So, yeah, like recapping you're going to look at the 7 people above and below you, and then you're going to take your lessons learned from the previous week in terms of who to tweak their speeds up. Now, when you're doing this, I'll definitely come back to our other 2 guests for this question as well. But when you're moving week to week, are you optimizing and increasingly tweaking up your spec, your GAC spec each week? Or are you, looking to actually just make big changes? Like this week, I'm going for a strategy where I have a 360 Queel, but next week I'm going to divert that speed elsewhere, and now it's going to go back to 345 because I'm going to catch him off guard this way. Or are you just, like, oh man, I just got Queel up to 360. Now I've got him locked where I want. Now I can work on the tweak on the next character. What's your approach there?
It changes, and I hate to say it that way.
That's a good answer, though. I like that.
But And the reason that it changes and the reason that it comes across is because the community starts to do something, and that might fluctuate the move you want to make, right? Mm-hmm. Sasha called it, it's moving pieces on the chessboard. So placing this team up top front, placing this team on the bottom front, what does that pull out from them to be able to utilize? Because once you use it, you lose it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's win or loss, whatever's going to happen.
Absolutely.
So it's I only could put it as like an art. how I move the mods or what you do, you don't get any more or less than what you've got. So I try to move the pieces to make the whole fight change. Yep. And changing one character in a fight with 5 characters can change how it plays out. And again, that piece is so important for the strategy and what I'm going to do for the week. Because one thing I don't like to do, and as Sasha mentioned, is I don't like to try to stay consistent. I like to be inconsistent. If my history changes, my opponent can't look at my history and say, oh, he's going to set it this way, or he's going to set it that way.
Yep.
If you can change up what your history looks like, even just a little bit. Like if I've always had Lord Vader on defense, and now there's this new counter out or these things out that are messing with that, I pull it off. You're coming in looking to expect for Lord Vader, and you have a counter of your own set up for that. Well, if it's not there, I've just changed your fight. You may not be able to use that counter you saved, and now that means that's not on defense for me to hit.
So,
and now I have
your point here is that going into the new week, irrespective of who your opponent actually is, you're always deliberately planning on how you're going to shake things up just for shaking things up's sake, so that bar graph on OmegaBot looks pretty level all the way across. No strong trends one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty clever. All right. Well, we'll circle back to you for more, sir. Dagger, sorry to leave you in the shadows for the last 10 minutes, but I'd love to hear now, in addition to what the other two gentlemen have shared, what are you doing to prepare for a new week of GAC? You can, if you make a distinction between like start of season when you don't have last week's intel to rely on, or if you do that differently while you're mid-season, I'm interested to hear.
Well, it's a combination of what Sasha and TJ have both said for the most part. Going into a season, I generally look at my roster as like a football team, so to speak. Everyone has their role. Everyone has their place. I have a general idea of where I want to use the majority of my characters, and they're modded sort of for that role.
Mm-hmm.
As the weeks go on, like I'll give you a perfect example. I don't use Django with bounty hunters anymore, and I haven't for like months. I don't know if many of us have. So I predominantly only use him with Maul, Newt, sometimes even like GG as like a Night Sister counter or something like that. So I know I took a bunch of speed off him, and I clocked him so he goes after Bam. So if I want to do Django lead, I now have him going after Bam.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that loss of speed and the addition of the potency cross doesn't actually hurt me under Newt or Maul, right? Because they're predominantly more on the he just assists, or him existing is doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like the bounty hunter counter versus like DR where he needed to be clocked in specifically.
So you're looking at modding your characters for flexibility, and you're constantly evaluating where they actually fit in a team. Like that goes to your point about the bounty hunters being, it's kind of an outdated place for Django these days in a lot of ways. So is that an accurate portrayal of your point?
Yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis. But yeah, every week, just going into the month, I have like has been said, I have an idea of what I want to do and a plan that I kind of want to execute based on the roster that I have. And as the weeks go on, to what TJ said, you want to change things up because you can't do the same thing every time. Mm-hmm. And to what Sasha said, you want to play into your opponent's weaknesses as well. So you need to be comfortable with as many of your teams as possible, which means your teams need to be clocked and modded to do as many things as possible.
Yes.
Another good example is my cat is 345 but like 110k health. I kind of split the difference. I'm faster than the healthy cats, but slower than the fast cats. So it gives me the flexibility to save it for offense versus cats I can't JML, while still allowing me to put it on defense and provide an actual speed threat.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
It may not be perfect, but you have to use the tools that you have at your disposal. Sorry, there was a notification that popped up.
Yeah, I saw that. I had to move it.
And to what TJ said, I don't generally do it at the beginning of the season because it's been inconsistent, the top 7 above, 7 beneath. But after the first week, I've found that it's reasonably reliable, as like 5 to 6 of the people I've looked at are usually in my bracket.
Yeah. Okay.
So
now this is pre-lock-in? This is pre-lock-in?
Yes.
Okay.
But I don't move too many mods around. So for example, if I'm going to have my Piet at like 350 and everyone's Darth Revan's 355, I'm not going to go out of my way to make sure that my Piet's necessarily faster. Sometimes what I'll actually do is I'll just like for the week allocate Gideon to my troopers and pull speed off of Piet. Mm-hmm. Because I can use that speed somewhere else for the week. So it's being able to semi-react to what you see. Now, I don't always change my plan, but to what TJ said before, it's still good to know what you're going to have to fight.
Yeah.
And to what Sasha said earlier as well, a lot of it just changes. And like the community, you just have to pick people's brains. Like I know with this current round, I picked Tasnix's brain a lot on like what to do. We'll get to the scouting tools here shortly.
Absolutely.
But I use the scouting tools on myself, and then I look to see like what I do, see if I have patterns, and then I'll sometimes modify some of my modding to fit that pattern, or just try and break the pattern. So if I'm always using a team on defense, I'll use Mon Mothma as an example. I had like Kyle built for potency and some other things, but if I'm using it on defense, like 13 out of 15 rounds, let's put it in a tenacity build. It makes it a little bit tougher to beat. Just little things like that. Leaning into your own patterns if you need to. If you always put your gas on defense, I got my gas up to 130k prot with a CD triangle. Yeah. Got my Rex up to 325. Right? If you have a pattern, you can either break your pattern or lean into it.
Yeah, make yourself like a max spec version of that team. If they're always going to see this one team from you, God help them when they do.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's kind of my process.
Yeah. I think all those are really good places to start, guys. My own thing is pretty much the same. I'm trying to think about what the differences are. My thing is I will review the top, 20 or so, 25 fastest characters in my roster. So I'll open my roster, sort by speed, and I'll just quickly look through them and check their speeds. Most of them I have in my head because I just see them all the time, so I have them just committed to memory. And I'll just quickly look at them and think, like, is there any way to improve this for next week or swap the speed to make something else perform even better? I'll think about that with only just that limited set of characters. It's you don't really need to go too much further than the top 20, 25 characters in your roster. And I'm excluding GLs here. GLs are their own thing. So, but from there, just thinking about it and the teams that they're on, I guess that's the last thing that I would add in there as far as what I do ahead of time. I admit I haven't really done that scouting that you guys are talking about for the 7 above and 7 below more than just once or twice, because I did have it where a bracket came and none of those guys were in there. None of them. So I was like, okay, I guess this isn't so accurate, but that was just that first week, so maybe I should give it a shake again. But all right, guys, so we've covered a few points here about what you're going to do before you go into the bracket. But once GAC lock happens and you've done all of your prep work, it's time to start looking at your opponents, which means we start getting into the scouting game. There's a lot of players that want to be good at the game, but don't want to put in the time on scouting because it feels like homework. And, it's, you're the one that's wanting to move on up in the game. You're wanting to be competitive. Like, how are you not going to watch the other team's games, Like, how are you not going to put that time in to better understand how to use your roster against their tendencies, like knowing their strengths and weaknesses? You can't leave this stuff on the table. So for anyone out there on the fence about the need to do scouting, come on into the camp, man. Once you accept the necessity for it, you can start to get good at it, and it's going to really raise your game. So let's bring it back to Sasha to start the scouting discussion. You were kind of working your way into the rudiments of your process there, Sasha. Did you want to take us through? Like, do you do something at the week level when you can see your actual bracket, or do you want to take it straight to the opponent level scouting?
Yeah, I don't tend to do pre-week scouting. I mean, I could see the value in it, but that's a lot of time to invest.
Limited
you don't
value.
Necessarily know who you're going to. Yeah, it's a little more marginal in the impact. So I definitely scout the particular opponent, and I'll take a look at history. The other thing that's happening, this may be the case with a number of other players, is as you kind of normalize where you are on the skill rating, if you're not bouncing around a ton, you may be seeing people for the second or third time. Yeah. I think I've had multiple matches now. And then I will refresh like going back through swgoh.gg, look at the history of what we've done previously against one another. I will look at their recent attack histories where maybe they've had challenges, just sort of assuming maybe they feel some discomfort there, and potentially, set similar teams. What I also end up doing a decent amount of it is like try and anticipate this. I think everybody would, like, are they scouting me? What will they see? And sort of one additional step that I'll tend to do is sort of create a straw man of what defensive theirs do I expect to see, sort of within some reasonable margin of error. Create a straw man of that in my little spreadsheet of like, okay, and then what is the minimum offense I'd be comfortable taking against that? And then I get a sense of how much I can put into defense. So I'll go through that exercise for most opponents. And just knowing at times I've got to throw in like the element of randomness and variability and just try and surprise them with something. I am probably the least sort of tool adept out of anybody here. Like I don't use any of the other analytical tools. I do everything just manually going through .gg. So I hand it over to you guys because I think you're probably more efficient and have better tools for it.
Well, I'm happy to go into those methods, and I know TJ could go into it at great length, and feel free to cut in with commentary that you have to embellish this, guys. But let me pull up for you on screen OmegaBot. All right. So I am a patron to OmegaBot. It's $5 a month. It's the best $5 I spend in a month, being a trying to be a better GAC player, because it gives you a unique view of the information. This is the front page of the report. It just tells you about when your opponent likes to attack. So I can see this guy's kind of all over the place. It's it's just counting up the hours from 0 out from attack start. But this page also shows it's kind of cut off here on screen. Let me move it off to the side. But you can see over here where it says the player Omicron. So it easily lists them here. All right, and then we come to the defense tab. And again, I'm just going to be brief here, guys. We could spend a lot of time discussing this, and there's already good videos out there. I know Fortmort had an interview with the actual maker of OmegaBot talking in detail about how to use it, so we won't really cover that here, but we will talk about these tools at a high level. So basically here in this defense, we can see what our opponent likes to set down and how do his opponents score against it. We can also see for what banners on average and in what order are they attacked. That order can tell you about placement, where the teams are placed. So that's pretty important stuff. Again, a little difficult to get that sense out of swugga.gg without a very painstaking manual review. Because with OmegaBot, I can look at the current season worth of matches, or the current season plus the last season, or a specific number of weeks, any length of time out into the past, and generate a report for how big of a profile I want on the guy. Obviously, only the last season or so should be really relevant to your strategic consideration. But then you go over here on offense, and then you have these other bar graphs, right? So this one is what are the teams he uses on offense, and then the color coding tells you, does he drop on these? What are the kind of banners he's getting? And then this second graph is showing what are the teams that he faces and how does he tend to score against them. So it's just a very, a very neat visual representation of your opponent. And, he could do the same for you. So that's OmegaBot. I definitely, you can get 2 weeks of data, you can get OmegaBot to make a report for you on any 2 weeks of data for free. If you want to be able to look at more than any particular 2 weeks, that's what the patron is for. And he has multiple tiers for that, but the $5 one's going to get you what you're looking for, guys. That's going to get your foot in the door to the added features and being able to look deep into the past. But I absolutely love this tool. And yeah, so that's OmegaBot. Then you got swugga.gg, which you use to actually check the individual matchups. Me personally, I will look at a whole last season here on OmegaBot. Then I'm going to go look at their last week or two of actual matches in swugga.gg and like this, and see, what he's done most recently. Because he might buck the trend that he's been building on this graph that you've been looking at. So you can't trust it completely, but you can definitely read it in terms of sense of what he's comfortable with, what his probabilities are, So, TJ, let's have you take the torch on what you do here with the scouting. I know I probably took some of your thunder here about OmegaBot, but I'm sure you got a lot to say.
If I may, I'm going to be similar to Sasha, so I'm going to take like a minute and a half to tell you why.
Oh, I mean, yeah, you want to cut in. Go for it, man.
Yeah, because then you and TJ can just go back and forth.
That's fair. Have at it. Get into it.
Similar to Sasha, I have a very proactive scouting where I run the OmegaBot and I run the HotBot. I kind of look at what they place. And I'm also an analog player. I use a pencil and paper, and I kind of like write down the teams I'm expecting to see, and then I write down the expected comps after checking .gg. And then I usually look at their top 12 defensive teams, their most common 12. So I want to save a counter for each one of the 12. I know there's only 11 defenses, but it saves you a backup team. And then you go and put what you have left on defense. But like Sasha said, that's when you kind of check to see what your opponent does. And then you kind of like shift things around ever so slightly if you think you can catch your opponent somewhere.
So you will start off looking at their defenses and planning one perfect counter for each one of those.
Yes.
And then the plan would be to set everything that is not that on defense. But before you will do that, you will then go look at their attacks and see if there's anything exploitable that might make you change this otherwise defense reading pattern.
Yes, and then I'll shift things around based on where they struggle or where they tend to use something.
Yeah.
Like if they always use gas, use their CLS versus gas, and then they always use their CLS versus Maul.
Yeah.
I'll try and put one behind the other, and I'll try and pick which one I care about after seeing what their backup counter is.
Okay, so you start with defense to build the rudiments of your plan, and then you go to the attack to actually refine it and see where more exploits might be, and then you actually get to the setting. So that's another good point, guys. Do yourself the favor of, you could do it like Dagger, do it on a scratch sheet of paper. You could do it like a couple of us here that do it on spreadsheets. Whatever's going to give you a visual representation of how you're actually going to plan out your board in defense. Don't start committing teams until you've designed the full board and you're satisfied with it. Don't go in thinking about like, here's how I want to lay out the bottom front zone, and then you lay out those teams, and now you're bound because now you're thinking, oh, well, if I do that, then I might not have this counter that I might need or something like that. Well, guess what, Mac? Your hands are tied. So don't do that. Do yourself the favor of planning it out somewhere that you can visualize it. So that's for sure a good point. Before we pivot over to TJ, Sasha, just a real quick question to you. Just hear what I asked Dagger. The general thrust of your scouting is do you tend to start with looking at their defense, planning the counterattack for that, then laying out your own defense based on that, or do you do it the other way around?
I think there's one sort of threshold consideration I have, and that is do I think they're going to go extremely hard defense or extremely light defense?
Okay.
I'll take a look at that as a possibility. I'm finding now that I run into players who are generally quite well balanced, but until I got to this sort of equilibrium, before then, I wanted to just make sure I wasn't going to run into somebody that puts all 6 GLs in the front. Because then it would change that. That was sort of like just threshold consideration, or they're just going to hold all 6 GLs because that would really shape it. But once I kind of got through that consideration, I would tend to, I guess I would start with my sort of fundamental preference on a defense. I'd have like a preliminary straw man on the defense I would like to be able to set.
Oh, you start with your own ideal. Okay.
I do with a sense of what and this is a rough, generally Galactic Legend plus a few non-GL staple squads that I have in there. Set that, have that in a spreadsheet as sort of like, all right, this is my starting.
You have that in mind before you do your scouting?
I do, yeah, even before I have the scouting.
Oh, wow,
generally.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And it's not
Usually I
uncommon
don't have anything like that.
I'll tend to do that, but it's highly fluid and flexible.
Sure.
And then I go into, let's understand this opponent, how much, and do I even want to wash that away and start over, or do I just want to modify it? And then I will go through something very similar to what Dagger described. I think it's quite similar to that. I'll do some contingency planning off of that, thinking like, okay, if there's 1 or 2 major changes, I think the lens I actually look at it with is, all right, this is what I think. That's sort of the rough straw man. how could I really get screwed by this? I
Right.
like to at least run through that because there's nothing worse than that hard stop of like, oh, good Lord, I didn't consider that. So I'll kind of run through that. There is one last point, and then we bring it over to TJ because I think it's you and TJ talking where I think the viewers will really get enlightened on the types of tools and a little more creative approach on this. But one last just sort of like fundamental consideration. This served me extremely well under the old format. It served me really well as I sort of ramped up in skill rating under the new format. I think is really applicable to people that aren't at sort of the very, very top end. When you set your defenses, really keep in mind to do everything you can to make every defense that you set a challenge and a risk for the opponent to get a hard stop.
Listen to this one, guys. Sasha learned me on this one a couple months back, and I've been sticking to this.
I tried to beat it into your skull, and you didn't listen to me. I'm glad Sasha got through to you.
Yeah,
setting jitters.
It's a reinforced message between Dagger and I, but I really am adamant about this. And actually, this fits into kind of the fundamental strategy that on defense, a successful battle is not necessarily a hold. A successful battle can be one where you draw out a counter that was going to be a necessity for a subsequent defense that you set. And as long as you have set very strong, and this is where like the map is a little limited. The only things that we can hide at this point in Division I are, at least from a ground perspective, are 3 squads in the back. I would want to make sure that even nowhere near end game players do everything you can for all 3 of those squads to have the potential to be hard stops, whether it's a DPS check or very limited set of potential counters for them. It's a huge difference maker because what will also happen, I've seen this in matches against great players where that player and I are completely neck and neck, and they happen to have one struggle on one battle out of 11 squads that I've set. But the fact, if that struggle is bad enough that they either have to just completely forfeit the battle and start fresh, or it leaves enough there that they have to use one of their top 11 teams, they may not have enough to clear at all. Like it can completely end as long as you have like that, and they don't have to be spectacular teams in the back, but like solid teams that can potentially, if there's enough misallocation of resource or a shortage of appropriate counters, it can be a hard stop.
So an example of teams to not set: Phasma OG Finn, Darth Maul with bad Sith. Like, avoid setting these teams because your opponent can just geos them for free. They can use their their leftover Night Sisters, right? It doesn't pose any threat really whatsoever.
And you can honestly make effective use of those teams for cleanups and stuff like that. Like let them be, the wind beneath your wings in a desperate offense.
Yeah, and to Sasha's point again, one of the teams I like to put in the back, 'cause I don't put it on defense frequently, is Maul Mandos with Droideka, who's 260. So he's 390, and that is just such a compelling speed check. Like, it's 1v2 GACs against people because you draw out their CLS, you draw out their gas, right? Like, you draw out these teams up front, and you just need, to Sasha's point, you need one team to give them a struggle. It doesn't even have to hold.
Yep.
It just has to be something they're not prepared to deal with.
And that should be something, I'm sure all of you guys watching this out there are trying to mod your teams to be the best that they can do so that, maybe you can get a hold against whatever your opponent sets. But more important than focusing on trying to have like the highest spec, like maxed mods on your teams, you can completely botch that by the way that you place your things down. So definitely consider that strategic placement. I think just a overall capture of what Sasha and Dagger were saying was be sure to always think about the trap potential of the back zone. That's nothing new, but it's just something you always have to be thinking about. So especially if you're going to be changing every week, you're thinking about how am I going to rearrange GLs and what teams will I scout for my opponent that he struggles with to set on bottom front, or what can I reliably set that he will counter it for sure with this, and I can draw that out and punish with a different team in the back. So always think about the dynamic nature of that front and back zone for setting your traps, and never fail to take the opportunity to set a kind of trap. My recommendation, never set just a cheese back zone. Always something. Always some kind of surprise. It doesn't have to always be a GL, but it should be something where you should have drawn out the best counter to it, the optimal counter to it up front. And then that can be the punish. If you want to save more GLs for offense, if you think you need that for an opponent, that's fine. But never set an easy back zone. Always give some kind of trap. All right, TJ, we got you on. Sorry, go ahead.
One more quick note before you two go nuts.
Yeah.
Another thing that I tend to do on my top wall is if your opponent is like 12 for 12 in their history using a team versus another team, I'll just put it up top because it's not fooling anybody.
That's a fair
if
point.
They have a super consistent, I'm going to do X versus Y, that way you don't have to waste it on the bottom front trying to draw something out. You put your gas up top if they steal S it every time.
Yep, same
they'll just
with
see
your
it,
DR.
and then they'll just reserve CLS. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of people know how to high banner.
Agree.
Yep.
But before we move off that, sorry, TJ, we'll come back to you.
Poor
But
TJ.
I'm a huge believer about putting as much pressure on that bottom front wall decision making as you can.
Yes.
Because it is the least informed moment that attacker is going to have. And if you have something like to Dagger's point, if it's something that they've just got nailed, screw it. Don't do that. Don't set it there because it's mindless and it was going to happen. And all that you're allowing is for them to see your back wall with more resources and optionality. Put things that, hey, maybe this needs a GL, or if I had a spare GL, I'd love to use it. Put that in the lower bottom. Force them to make those tough decisions. Or do I want to use JKR here? Do I want to use Bad Batch? Force those decisions when they are underinformed rather than when they see the whole map.
Yep.
All right. Now I don't want
Sorry, TJ. We really do love you.
Yes,
really
yes. So first, yes. Thanks for waiting so patiently and kindly, TJ. But yeah, we'll spend a few minutes here talking about the tools and what we use for scouting. And I think I might like to get you guys back together for another video in the near future about just like having, I don't know, one of us go through a scout, and then each of the rest of us chiming in with what you'd be doing here and here and here and here. So we could capture that on a different video, because this one's already approaching a decent length, and I don't want it to run out forever. So we're going to cover like this high level stuff about getting prepared, and then a little bit on the scouting tools here, and we'll catch in a different video. We'll say early here next week for the we could do it for the start of week 3 if you guys are down and available. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about these tools, TJ. Where do you want us to kick off? Because I can bring something on screen. You won't be able to see it, but I'll be able to, have it up and, whatever.
So Discord, I think, with hot utils and the ability to scout the start. So I always like the GA compare. The GA compare being able to utilize that open door. So just to give like a number of Omicrons, to give a general idea about somebody. Did they just start playing GAC, or have they been playing for a long time? So while some players, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the thing here that I do at the start of each week, as soon as the lock is done and you have your bracket of 8 generated, I come and I do 2 things. GA compare is the very first one I set, and then I just do GA current, so I can have just my current round matchup for the compare. But it's so important, guys, at the start of a season, do that GA current. No, sorry, GA compare. Very first thing, as soon if you're around, if you can capture it, enter that command to Hotbot the second that your bracket is locked in, because that will give you the best odds of having an accurate snapshot of where their mods were at lock. Because a lot of people try and do deception with swapping their mods after lock, so you can't get accurate reads. But check this out. At least you'll be able to get a tell if it is different, because you run the GA compare now at the beginning of the week. Then when you go on to fight your round 2 and round 3 opponents, you run the GA current, and then you compare that to the GA compare you did at the start of the week, and you look for any differences in the modding across those characters, those GLs and stuff. So let me pull this up here on screen so you guys can see it.
Hey, Tass, one interesting thing from what we heard on Friday night from CG, the mod moving shenanigans will go away. It sounds like mods will lock when GA launches, meaning it's not when you join. So you can join, but everyone's mods will lock simultaneously when the season begins. So like doing what TJ suggested, it gives you an accurate snapshot if you do it in the moment.
Wait, maybe I'm a little confused about that. So let's say that we have the lock period come and go. Let's say it's like 5 p.m. It's now 6 p.m. because we just had the time change for me. So it's 6 p.m. now. It's locked. But what happens if I changed my mods? Like I'm waiting in hot utils and I flop back into TW set right after lock. What happens then if you run GA compare? What do you see?
It would still be that. It would be the current mods. So if you run it like that, so to your point, Taz, and I know where Sasha was going. Okay. They're looking that you can fluctuate all the way up until the time of they're called lock-in period. Yeah. You can keep doing whatever you want. Join, do whatever you want. The system does not lock until the lock period. Okay. So I know what Sasha's talking about, but to your point, and one of the strategies that I've done before, and I know some players will do to throw people off, pull off all your mods. Or pull off all the speed, or do whatever you're doing so that you keep them guessing. So to your point,
yeah, I do that from time to time.
So do I, and I've done it before because I don't want you to see what I'm doing. If you have the funds and the ability to do that, it is a great strategy.
Yep.
To keep people guessing, like you don't know what my Dark Revan is going to be. Maybe I've moved mine up to a 360. Well, just give a magical number, or something else that you've accounted for your troopers to be able to go against this Dark Revan or this setup. And you go into the game, the speeds are changed. Yep. So everything you've accounted for and that you're prepping for is now out the window. So this proposed counter is no longer going to be able to do the counter that you were trying to do in the first place. So to your point, Taz, yes, being able to compare right at the stop and then do the GA current for where you're at, where they may have changed something around, gives you a good imprint of what you're looking at.
Yep. All right. Yep. Fair enough. All right. So I'll just quickly bring up on the screen just to show the Hotbot report. I think most of you guys are familiar with this, but it gives you a useful summary here about the GP, what the Zetas are between you guys, you and your opponent, Omicrons. This plus T80 here, this is your top 80 average speed. That's kind of useful to get a sense of how you and your opponent match up in the relevant section of your roster, the section that's going to be doing, the real competition. And then you have this mod analysis section here. It's great, just to get a sense of where you sit relative to your opponent speed-wise through each tier, going from top down. Relics is the same. This is a gem when you can actually compare the Galactic Legends side by side, look for differences. It might help you in your counters. Like, if you have a counter with your JML that requires you to be faster than their JMK, this is the spot to check that. And then you scroll on down to key characters. You've got just a lot of the, the top and determinant characters for several teams. Hotbot does update this, and I actually think you can create a custom version of this where you
That's actually what I was going to say, is that you can add whatever characters you want to it, because if you have ones that Lego does, and I think it's a great idea. Yeah. Anytime there's a GAC Omicron that goes out, he'll add that to his compare so that it immediately pulls it up and you can see it. And with the bot, you can tell who has the Omicron if you're looking hard enough. I think it's a great idea for him. And again, that's not mine to keep. I didn't come up with that idea. That was his that told me. But I think it's phenomenal. Or if you know that there's a common counter, everybody knows Jawas. And if you're looking at that, so if you want to put your Jawas in there, and like to say, do they have Jawas? And that gives you the option to say, oh, you're gonna have to use a harder team against this Mon Mothma. Yeah. Or if they're always using those little complements and those little added pieces can go a long way for your scout and for what you're looking for.
For sure. Well, anyways, guys, the last couple points here about the ships is, you can see that you can compare the relic level of your Piet and GK here to his. That's just part of the default template. And we can see here my opponent has a relic 8 Piet. That sticks out to me because I have a relic 9 negotiator. I could reserve my negotiator for attack now, This is just, it's helpful to have these tools because they give you different visualizations of what you could find manually through Swugga.gg. So, Sashaisha is doing it full old school style, just reviewing week by week, round by round, and building up a profile on his opponent. And I think that using these tools gets you to a similar understanding, if not exactly the same, And I think it ends up saving you a lot of time because I know how it is to go through that fully manual method. And maybe you feel you have a higher degree of confidence because you've looked at so many more matches in detail this way. But getting these trends, this stuff's accurate, guys. You can definitely use it for your planning. All right, so I flopped back cameras back on you, TJ. We've got Hotbot covered. What's next? So you run your GA compare and your GA current. What's next?
So if I'm going in, it's basically a back and forth. And now, thanks to you, Taz, you've got me on to OmegaBot and doing the things, and I will be becoming a Patreon because I think the save time period of utilizing that to be able to look at a current history and going beyond. Everybody can go out 6 weeks, right? And you can look at it for free.
I thought it was only 2. Maybe they changed that. I thought it was
It's
only
rounds.
It's six rounds. It's 6
Oh,
rounds.
okay,
So
six
it does the
rounds.
2
2
weeks.
Yeah.
But to me, if there's a flip or a flop and it goes beyond that, and somebody who will say if it's a Sasha or if it's somebody else, let's say they've gone back and something they were doing a month ago, the ability to go back further to see this history of this setup or this struggle, the more information you have, it's like the old Yo Joe situation for GI Joe. The more you know, right?
That's
well,
right.
The more you have that information, it just works.
Makes
the more
sense.
you have for a setup or a preparation between that, again, .gg is oh man, how they're not getting paid by CG, I'll never know for everything that they do because I don't think there's going to be one top player out there who's not saying, well, I didn't look at .gg. I don't even have to say the full thing. It's just .gg is like, oh yeah, I looked there because everybody does.
And
no
that's
matter who you are.
That's another nice thing about that OmegaBot Patreon. You know, the guy who runs OmegaBot, he actually has an arrangement with Swugga.gg because he uses their API for his thing, and there's a profit sharing arrangement there between them. So everybody's eating at this table. I mean, everybody's doing well. All right, so we do the OmegaBot as I went over, and we can go into that in the next video, guys, about the really deep scouting. But these are the tools. You do your Hotbot to get that one view. You do your OmegaBot, and you start looking through. What's next, TJ?
If I'm looking at it in the way I go, and I see Dagger with his hand up, so Dagger.
Oh, Dagger, chime in, man.
Go ahead, Dagger.
Oh,
that raised hand thing's kind of nice.
I was simply going to say, possibly in Sashaisha in my defense, we're going to look at the Swugga.gg anyways, so running the bots is cool, but it's just another snapshot. And if I'm going to manually comb through your GG regardless, sometimes, while the tools are amazing, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's just additional effort or may cause you to overthink. And just kind of keep that in mind when you're doing it, that, find a way that works for you.
Yes.
And then do that.
Yeah, we're all talking about our methods, and I mean, I think I was building up towards that anyway. I think TJ and I were going to end up going in that direction because you do use these tools, but it's to give you, like the sense of where you're at, right? A generality. You still look like I'd said earlier here in the video at the last 1 to 2 weeks of matches in detail to really see what he's doing recently and where he's struggling, right? You'll get your most accurate view from there, but in terms of seeing, being able to look back in time, like with what TJ was just saying here and what I was alluding to earlier, the ability to look back in time to see the trends and see how they've changed. Like, I love seeing when an opponent, they wiped on this one thing a few weeks back, but they stopped failing on that matchup. Why? Because now they ironclad 100% of the time use this to counter that team. And now I know I've got him on that. Now I can exploit what he thinks is a strength this week. And that kind of information you can only get by inspecting individual rounds on Swugga.gg. So, very fair point, Dagger. That's point well made. Anything you wanted to spring in on with that, Sasha, before we go back to TJ here?
No, I'd say go back. I'm learning on the tool front. So, TJ, it's you, man.
I hear you. All right, TJ, take us away. What's next?
I think the one thing that's not being mentioned, but I do for me personally, nothing's ever the same when you're going to go in and everybody has a plan, but being flexible. So what I call flexible counters. If I'm going to bring in 11 teams, I need to be able to move those pieces on the board Because if Sasha has a tendency that he's always a gambler, right? He's top of the board. He's playing always a certain player we're looking at. So anything that's going on, if I need to be able to flex that counter to move it to something else, to change my strategy, being able to do that is always a good thing. It's always good to have what I'm going to go in with. But if I need to move, I don't care, CLS moves everywhere, right? You can do so many things with it. And it's like, I've always used it against GG or for gas or whatever it's going to be. Well, now we have Star Killer on the table. And I need to be able to get a clean counter to be able to get through the bottom wall to start being able to build the full story. Flexing those counters to be able to move from one piece to the next without making me struggle, I think is a good takeaway to keep in mind, that I want to bring in 11 teams that I can move as I need to.
So that's
because if you change something,
that's independent of the actual scouting effort.
Right. Yeah. That to me is so pivotal. I don't know how many times where I've been able to have to move like just one character. Right. I still remember one in my head out of all the times we've changed where I had to take Han to do something else off my CLS team, but still keep a viable CLS team without that opening. So being able to move those key pieces and flex my counters to be able to move past your strategy is just a huge piece.
Dig it. Makes sense. Yeah. All right. So we'll say that that's like a parallel path in addition to scouting. You're thinking about this in parallel with how, regardless of whatever you're going to do with this guy, you're thinking about how to change up your own defensive pattern. So fair enough. But what's next for you in the scouting? Is this do you go into Swugga.gg next, or do you just run from the tools? You don't do Swugga.gg anymore? What's your technique?
No. Always Swugga.gg.
There it is. Yep.
Because you have to. The reason is your bot, the bot that Taz got me on or whatever I'm doing, using the GA compare, it doesn't tell the story of the team. You need that visual comparison to say you added this character there. Just because it says, and I'll give you one, it says EP. Well, was that a Star Killer team? Was that an actual?
You would have to
EP
assume, right? Exactly. Yeah, when you're looking at Omega Bot, it doesn't say SK guys. It doesn't say Star Killer. It says who's the leader of each team is how the bar graphs are named.
Are they doing JK Cat? Is it Ray Cat? Just because it tells you the lead doesn't tell you the team.
Yep.
So if you're not looking at the whole, or you're looking at the whole picture, you can sell yourself short to say, okay, they said C. Well, is that a regular C team, or is that C Malik? Changes the comp and the counter.
Now let me pull this up on screen, guys. I want to say there is this details view that's it's kind of tedious on the eyes here in Omega Bot, where you can actually look at the round level information. But I personally, I don't know about you guys, I don't think this view is particularly usable. Like I don't get anything out of this that I don't get just from simply going over to the guy's GG, looking through his match history. Now I've got pictures, right? I got pictures for all these characters, and I can just see who lived and who died and what the state of their health bars and everything was. I don't have to look at all of this text to interpret it. So yeah, absolutely agreeing with TJ there, and Sasha and Dagger in turn. There is no substitute for doing scouting on Swugga.gg and looking, round by round. Yep. Back to you, TJ. What's next?
That really comes in. It calculates everything that I'm looking at. But then again, I'm like looking at my setup. I've got like 3 screens or something like that. So I'm on my phone. I'm on screens. I'm looking at everything, and then it's just looking at tendencies, right? And that's I try to look for the tendency of the player. If they generally set heavy, the expectation is they're going to set heavy. Whatever they try to flex on their teams, the tendency of the player, you can't beat how a player works. There's just that's their build, that's their personality, right?
Yep.
A more efficient player is going to build an efficient board.
Yep.
They're not going to turn into a heavy player. So trying to learn the player by studying everything you're doing, the more you know. Again, it goes back to G.I. Joe.
Yep.
The more you know on the player and what they do as a tendency, you can kind of start to build your story and how it looks, right? Thank you for doing that, Dagger.
Absolutely.
And that is so key, though, because you cannot beat human characteristics. The character of a human stays the same no matter how they try to change it. You can't. You're not changing who you are as a player.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, it's tough to break out of your patterns to such a degree, guy. You're gonna like what you like, and to what Dagger had said much earlier here was, if you've got something about you that's super predictable, lean into it or buck against it hard, like, sharp 90 degree turn away from it, or just, invest those mods, commit the right characters, and give the most robust form of that team you could.
Or here's a really interesting take that I know Tasnix always pushes back on me with. There's nothing wrong with setting a bad version of a good team. For example, my opponents always use Bad Batch, or when I look at it, I had an opponent, he used Bad Batch against every single Qui-Gon, so I put Qui-Gon, JKA, and 3 Gear 12s, and you know what? He Bad Batched it.
Yep.
Right? You don't have to have a good team if they're always going to do the same thing.
Right, so that's a good counterpoint to what we were talking about earlier with setting that high-spec Qui-Gon Jinn team. Like, to do that, guys, you need to have the turns like 1 speed apart, and they need to be modded to very high speeds, because the intent of the team is to actually price out the speed of a Bad Batch Echo. Like, if they go in with a Bad Batch, you're going to punish them because you go first, and because you'll have it go, your characters pop off 1, 2, 3, 4 like that, you can just blow up somebody's, opposing wrecker, and their whole situation deteriorates. But, Dagger's point is completely valid. You see an opponent who's using one team one way, you don't have to set all those pieces, right? Because if we're talking about setting that high-spec Qui-Gon team, that's also consuming camp. That's denying you a potentially, a potential GL counter team, right? It's got to be worth all that for you to do it, and it won't be worth that all the time. That's why I said I enjoyed using that team for about a week or so, and then I found myself just really needing the parts more than the whole thing. So, yeah, I sometimes push back on that when you say that you like to set the worst version of a team, because I'm thinking sometimes I can draw a specific counter that I think he'll only try against a higher spec one, but credit where credit is due, Dagger. I do often just set something just because, and I could set a lighter version. So, very fair point, guys.
I will say, this is something that was core to my Rey defense strategy for like better part of a year. And this also sort of ties into know your opponent, because I no longer do this. My opponents would be able to overcome this strategy. But for a long time, I would set Rey teams on defense like clockwork, and I wouldn't set them with the resistance heroes. I wouldn't set them with A quality resistance people. I would set Rey on the bottom front with B-level stuff that I was confident would consume a GL counter from the opponent. And that was all I wanted. Rey would lose, so I'd lose the battle, but they would have to use a GL. And I would fortify my 11th squad or whatever, because I would be able to allocate better resources. It's hard. Most of this is resource allocation and management game anyway. Mm-hmm. But like I used to do that all the time with Rey. Now I don't, because I know I've got opponents that if I set Rey with junk, like I may have Chirpa and Geos taking it out. Like, certainly a GAC squad and things like that. Yeah. But that hadn't been the case for a long time. I still look for those little opportunities if I can sort of cheat off of one thing to fortify someplace else. Yep. But still, that team was going to lose anyway, and maybe it draws 3 or 4 banners off of the opponent. But I now have a much stronger secondary team. I'll do that.
Lord Vader's one of my favorite teams to do that too. I frequently run out of teams, and by run out of teams, I mean I have like 20-ish teams that are just really, really good, and then the next 5 are all kind of equal. And if I can pull Maul off the Lord Vader team, I go up to like 21 teams. And like I was saying before, the Droideka speed check is kind of absurd if you can jack him up.
Yes. Yep. That's for sure. That Droideka thing. I don't know who pioneered it. Maybe it was Fatal, maybe it wasn't. But that thing where you can activate your Maul Mando's team without using Watt guys, that's the bee's knees. That's a good one. Yeah, no arguments there. And thanks for that point, Sasha. That was an interesting addition. Mm-hmm. I like that one. All right, guys. I think we've been at it just over an hour here, so we'll start looking to wrap it up. But do we have? Yeah, I know how the time flies when you're having fun, right?
I honestly didn't realize it. What you're talking like
exactly
GAC and all that it goes.
And
forever.
I know that we could sit here and do a sample scout right now, and we would all be cool with it.
Right to the vein,
we'd easily lose another hour talking about a deep scout here. So we'll catch that on the next video. And you know what? If I expect Sasha by the way, guys, I forgot to mention earlier in the video, I'm like rank 30 something right now, like 35, 33, right around there. So we're all
Hey,
top 50,
can I
top
add
100.
in really quickly on that, Tass?
Yeah.
Tass's rank is with him not having Star Killer in any GAC yet.
Yes, that's true.
So that is like an extra Tass hat off to you on that.
Well,
man.
thank you kindly, sir. Yes, I will have Star Killer in effect for next week. He won't be his brightest best self because I think I'll only have him at Relic 7. I used my materials to have a Relic 8 First Order officer to escort my 7-star TIE Echelon next week. So
You ship junkie, you.
oh man, it's gonna be monstrous, man. All right, well, I want to thank all of you. You know, Sashaisha, TJ5270, and Dagger. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope we get to collaborate on another video soon. I'm thinking next week, if you're game for it, Sasha, since you're probably going to have the highest level matchup for the start of the week, maybe we can do that scouting video with your opponent, and we'll have you on screen, and the rest of us can be the angels or devils on your shoulder, so to speak.
Yeah, happy to. That sounds great.
That sounds great. All right, we'll try and set that up, guys. But thank you all for watching. It's been great. And again, thanks to the guests. We'll see you guys real soon in the next video. Take care. All right. And